I want to piggyback off something that Bruce was just saying about reaching people who are not on social media and things of that nature. And this is kind of directed at a U.S. audience. Mm-hmm. And Candy and I were talking about this beforehand, about a U.S. audience versus an international audience. But on this question, there's a certain demographic that just doesn't believe the climate change, the climate crisis is real. So we all may have someone in our family who is like that. The demographic also tends to be mistrustful of the UN and other international bodies. Are there certain audiences that should just be written off as unreachable, or given how incredibly important saving the planet is for all of us, do we need to just double down and triple down to reach these folks and just put energy into getting them, or do we write them off?
Twitter.
well, no. So I have to tell you, I live in this world every day, not from an SDG perspective. I mean, you could ask me that question about diversity. Clearly, there are some people who are equally and maybe even more resistant to diversity. And so on any given day, there are people who are on board who say, tell me how I can help. There are people who still need a little convincing. And there are people who are on the spectrum of, if you just go away, I'd be happier, right? And so I don't think that I can give up on any of those along that spectrum. And
that's very instructive. Tell me your strategy for the latter.
Well, the focus is really to focus on the people who are engaged, because oftentimes, as you said, they have friends and family who aren't. And sometimes the voice to engage the people who aren't engaged are the people that's closest to them. So as you start to engage people along this spectrum, you will eventually get close enough to them so they don't hear it from me. I am the voice for diversity. These people don't hear me. But if a person who's close to them, who is more like them in whatever ways that might be, has a better opportunity. So my focus has always been on trying...
Like a middleman strategy.
Exactly.
Strategy.
Exactly.
That's
trying to find allies that actually can have a conversation that's different than they would have with me in the room. If you want to take it any further, we can take that offline.
And I completely...
Who wouldn't want to have you in the room?
Okay. And I completely agree with all of that. And it's about time and energy allocation ultimately as well, because we all, have 24 hours in a day. Right, and an analogy that I like to use is, even with Michael Jackson and Steve Jobs, no amount of money.
Let's change change one of those guys at the moment.
Either way. But what I'm saying here is that no amount of money could buy them a second more of time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? No amount of their millions or billions can buy you a second more of time. So we have to be really mindful of where we allocate that time ultimately. So do we allocate that time to try and convince the converted, or do we take that same time, which is so precious, and actually educate and mobilize those that really can make a difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
amplify it.
Exactly.
So those are 2 points of view. Let me offer a third, which is something that we call the political model, which is that the people who are already with you are with you. You don't need to spend any more time or money. And the people who are really against you, and you can use smoking as an analogy, there are people who are going to smoke no matter what. You got to let them come to it in their own time, maybe through influencers. But then there's that middle group that you have a chance of swaying. And you can use the people who've got you as the influencer group, but it's that middle group where I'd advocate for spending the time and money, because there's something there we can pull them in. And we don't have to invest as hard in the fringes.
And
I love that. That's three very similar takes and articulated 3 different ways. I love that. You each. But I think what I could take as a commonality is using a middleman approach to reaching.
And the other thing that I would tell you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Bruce.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is that we have to be mindful of that 12-year. The 12-year timeline that you mentioned earlier. At the end of the day, we have 12 years. That's not that much time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So when you look at it through that lens, again, do we want to spend any time of those 12 years trying to convince those and spend time there? Or actually, we have 12 years, folks. It's on the time clock.
And I would say it's important to find ways to activate all of them, whether it's the middleman getting this group of resistors, whether it's amplifying the group of people who are already there. I would also say young people. There's something very interesting. My 13-year-old niece came to my house, and I have a rug that is artificial, but she didn't know it was artificial. And she looked down and she said, how many animals had to die for you to have this rug? She's 13. And for a few minutes, I was like freaking out. And then I pulled over to her, I said, see, it's artificial, right? So, but to think about the consciousness of young people. Now, she's 13 today. In 12 years, she'd be 25. But imagine if wherever she's learning that from in a school, if she's taking it home, there are some of these children in this resistor group that if we could get to them through education in schools, that they can take it home. Because even in some of my toughest conversations with people who I've seen convert, oftentimes it was because of their daughters or their children. And whether that was about embracing the LGBT community or whether that was about gender equity, oftentimes it was a little voice that said, well, why do you think that? And the hardest conversations that I've ever had was with resistors until they had that conversation. And they call me and say, do you know what my daughter said to me today?
Wow.
Or do you know what my son? So I feel like there's still an opportunity to engage young people.
You read my mind, because that was my next question, and I was going to ask about, and I can still just mention a couple of names. Greta Thunberg, who is this 16-year-old, I believe, Swedish girl who spoke at the UN climate conference in December and chastised world leaders for not doing anything. And then she took the train 32 hours from Sweden to Davos and took them to the woodshed again and said, you rich capitalists, you're not getting it. Right. Then there's a girl in New York who's 13. I think she's from California, but she moved to New York, and she's taking off from school every Friday and protesting outside the UN about climate, Alexandria Villasenor. So my question is, should we as adults get out of the way and let the kids do this on their own because we're just going to screw it up? Or should we be helping kids and lighting the way for them and giving them the platform to make these kind of leadership moves?
Oh my God, we have to support them with every ounce of energy we've got. I mean, they have the energy and the inspiration and the innovation, but we all know as we get older, there are things we know that they don't. There's money and connections we have, and anything that we could do. I mean, now I'm thinking, how can I give this girl a sandwich on a Friday? You know, let's help them.
She's outside the UN, right on that bench every Friday.
Well,
and I think
we'll go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really about all hands on deck. You know, it really is all hands on deck. So yes, I think it's about equipping and empowering the younger generation, but also we have to communicate to the older generation as well. Why? Because we are living longer, ultimately, and we are contributing to the climate issue. You know, we can have a voice, help, inequality, help quality education and all the rest of it. So it requires all hands on deck.
And I'll give a shout out to Common in a song called Glory. It said it takes the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy. So I guess that goes to Common and Legend. If you don't know about the song Glory, make a new friend. Download iTunes or Spotify.
Shout out.
Listen, you got to reach people every way, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you're watching on,
I have more questions. How are we doing on time? We're pretty good on time. All right. One new initiative that I'm currently involved in is a new foundation called Earth's Call. Earth's Call has just committed $50 million to the MacArthur Foundation's Lever for Change to find and fund innovations to fight the climate crisis. So what I wanted to ask the panel is, can you leave us with an inspiring story that you've come across that gives you hope for the future? Or what gives you hope for the future?
What gives me hope is seeing and something we've talked about in the course of the panel, all the individual efforts by people. I mean, there are those of us in the room today who are interested enough to be here. There are people all over the world doing efforts, gigantic and small, to make a change in the world. There's more good than not. And I think the challenge is getting over the exhaustion, teaming up with people who are doing good things, making those connections, and these as just a North Star, just having that in mind and knowing we can all be connected in that gives me energy and gives me purpose and hope.
And I would say just even being in this room, it's so great to see everybody that's come out this morning to, hear about this talk, and those of you who are, ultimately interested in advocates of the SDGs. And I would say that gives me hope. You know what I mean? That we have platforms like this. We have, South by Southwest, and we have other conferences and things where we are able to share and amplify the message. And so that really does give me hope, alongside the story of your niece. Yeah. That was like, how many animals did it take for you to have this rug on your floor, Aunt? You know what I mean?
Remember, it was artificial. If you just listened to this part of the conversation, it wasn't in real animals.
We're going to start calling you Auntie Candy.
But so stories like this really do give me hope, because we can make a change and a difference. We're living in an amazing time with the technology that we have. And I'm such a huge believer that for those of us who can read and for those of us who can write, we can really change the world. We really, really, really can. It's all about whether we choose to. So my shout out and call to action for all of us is, choose to make a difference in the world. Look to see how you can be that advocate in your community, in your home, You know what I mean? With your friends and peer group.
And maybe choose the one thing so you don't get crazy or overwhelmed, right? But you do the one thing you can do.
Yeah, and I think the one thing any of us can do is tell people about the SDGs. Ultimately, that's the one thing, and say within the 17, choose one or two. You know.
I was going to. I wanted to let Candy speak, but just based on what Bruce said, I was going to suggest that everybody watching this tell one person that you know about the SDGs that you think might not know about them, and see if
I
that
say
can make
5. I say
3 and 5.
We've got 12 years.
Candy, you have the last word.
I don't want this to seem like propaganda, because I know people who are watching this may not know me. But I went to Twitter because I believe that Twitter has the broadest reach and the biggest brand in the world. And I believe that change can happen through Twitter. So my hope in the future is in Twitter becoming the platform that enables us to find more good in the world, that enables us to learn more about the things we need to know about the world without leaving our phones, without leaving the space where we are. Because the answer to what we all need to talk about, the answer to what we all need to do, it's in one place, it's in Twitter. And so if we could figure out how to leverage Twitter to help amplify more good in the world, reach all demographics, geographics, as well as thinking about just all the intersections, thinking about the things that are associated with the SDGs, I believe Twitter can give us all hope if we can find a way to amplify the Nikes of the world and the Walgreens of the world. Twitter is one of the best communication platforms in the world. And so I believe in my whole heart we've been given each day to use as we will. We can waste it or use it for good. When tomorrow comes, the day will be gone forever, and in its place will be the decisions and the actions that we left behind. And I just hope every day that people are mindful of the things that they do as individuals, whether they think about the SDG, whether they think about diversity, whether they think about Twitter, of how the actions they have impact others. And if I have a purpose on the planet, it is to spread that message. It is to think about how to help Twitter to spread that message and engage others. And it's about making the world more diverse in interactions of daily activities, not because the organization you work for said it, but because it's who we are as a world. Now, that's a challenge, but as long as I'm on the planet, I'll be doing that.
Oh, we're going for you for president.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank everybody for collaborating on this panel, for helping to drive the message forward for the SDGs, and thanks to you all for attending. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.